Rashmi, it's so lovely to meet you. I was just saying to you, it's the first time we've met, but I feel like I've known you. I don't know why
Likewise.
that is, right?
It's a
It's so
yoga vibe.
it's
We're
a yoga
present.
vibe. That's right. Amazing. So a reason I want to speak with you because you've got this amazing book, Finding absolutely gorgeous illustrations. And I love the whole story around the because I do, like all of us, really feel like it's an important concept and hard to describe to children. So
Mhm.
I would love to speak to you specifically. We get a lot of questions in our community, Rashmi, about how to publish children's books, specifically
Yeah.
around yoga. And you've taken the traditional publishing route that isn't always on offer for everyone, but there's always a curiosity. So let's
Yeah.
start by talking about, your background, how you became an author. What's
Yeah.
your journey that got you here?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's so nice to be connected.
Yeah.
Um, and thanks for taking Finding Om out and reading it. It's always nice to know that a book is getting love. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Um, so for those of you who I may not have interacted before, my name's Rashmi Bismark, and I am a physician by training, but I also am a mindfulness teacher, mindfulness meditation teacher, yoga teacher. Um, and in terms of the book journey, it's really interesting because I'd say about like 8 to 10 years ago, there's like a little boom in like books that were coming out on like mindfulness and meditation and yoga, and Susan Verde's beautiful books were there and like all these gorgeous books. And we were living abroad at the time. And so anytime I would come home to America, I would do like buy all of these books while I'm home to like stuff in my suitcase to take back with us.
Right. Yes.
And it was like one of those times, and I was at my parents' house, and I had all these books, and my mom and we were like looking through them, and my dad was like, "Oh, like there's all these yoga books, yay!" But then it's like, but there's no like, where's India in any of this? Like, there's no, and that comment took me by pause because I was just so excited that there were yoga books and meditation books for kids. Like
Yes.
I didn't even recognize that erasure. And so then it like planted a seed, and like, we were all joking around and we were like, oh, Dad, like we should write a book together. And my youngest daughter loves to draw, and she's like, oh, I'll draw the pictures, like it was,
Yes.
and, unfortunately my dad became ill and within a couple of years had passed away. And so, um, it was always in the back of my mind, but it was kind of like I wasn't ready for it yet. And about a year after he passed, um, this my younger daughter got a like really pretty, when they're little, they love all those journals with like all the stuff, the sparkles and glitter. And then she had like a
Yes.
pen and all these things. And we were sitting there Christmas morning, and she was like, "Oh, remember you and Apapa were talking about writing a book? Let's make a book in my journal." And so that's how we kind of just started brainstorming ideas about a book. And I didn't really even think it would go anywhere except whatever we wrote that morning. As I kept like playing around with it, I was like, "Oh, like there's something special here." And so
Mm.
I had no idea either how to even go about publishing a book. So I think I wrote a little Facebook post like, what should I do? Does anybody know like any connections? And of course, I had a lot of friends that kind of wrote different things in. And one of my friends had mentioned my future publisher, which at that time was called Parath Babies, and they were located near you, near Boston as well,
Yes.
is the home of the press. And so I was really curious about that, and I knew it wasn't quite ready to submit anywhere, So I kept working on the draft and like learning a little bit more about picture books. And when I felt like it was something that I could actually share with somebody. um,
Yeah.
I sent it right to the press. Actually, they had an open submission policy, and I'll get to what that means in a moment.
Yeah.
Uh, and so they kind of looked at my first draft and they were like, there's something here. It's not
Mm.
quite yet ready yet. So why don't you work with our editor and then we'll see where we're at. And so I worked with their editor. And she kind of gave me even more of a picture book 101, about all the things. And a traditional picture book is 32 pages, and how to kind of think about page turns and like all the things. And so we worked together, and I finished that draft for Finding Ohm, which eventually became the book that you held in your hand. So
Yes, right.
that was a little bit, and that is a little bit of an untraditional path, because like I mentioned,
Mm,
this publisher had an open submissions policy. Many publishers, this publisher that I published with was a indie publisher, so they were a smaller traditional publisher. Most publishers will require you to have an agent sometimes to
mm,
submit. So some places will have these open submission or periods of time where they might do open submission. And
mm.
otherwise, you often will have to submit with an agent. So it was,
Right.
in that way, it was my first go around was also a little untraditional with a traditional path.
Yeah,
So
right. I love so much what you're saying, Rashmi. I wish, when you see books, and I'm obsessed with picture books. Every time I go anywhere new, I always end up in the children's book section, even though my daughter, like yours, are all grown up.
Mhm.
But I wish that we could know more about the authors, because knowing that story, my heart burst
Mhm.
thinking about your dad and the legacy that you've
Yes.
left him, and that he's watching you,
I
and your daughter, that you did this in collaboration with your daughter. And what a beautiful, beautiful experience, and especially because of the heritage in India. Yes, absolutely. All of our voices matter, and this matters as much as everyone else's, if not more, right? So I think that's really, really special. I'm so glad you shared that. I just wish that other people could know. And I love the way that you also said you put a Facebook post up, right?
Yeah.
That we don't have to do this alone, right? We
No, we
just have to
can't.
ask, right? We can't do it alone. That sometimes you just have to keep asking,
Yeah.
and I love the way you started with your friends and family, because
Mhm.
I think sometimes if we just sort of blast emails out to published authors who don't know you, and
Mhm.
make really make some demands, right? And they don't know who you are. Whereas I
Right,
think if
right.
it's much more familiar if you do it on Facebook with your friends and
Oh, I
family.
will say the kidlit
Yeah.
world, people are very friendly and like
Yes,
happy to
right.
share. So, and,
Yes.
and that was the beauty of this. So as I
Mhm.
sort of then tiptoed my way into the kidlit space, um,
Yeah.
you know how it is when you're part of yoga community, you love building community. So I
Yes.
quickly was eager to connect with other authors and just learn more about, you know, the journey that other people have been on. But also too, I was also trying to market my book too. So kind of learning things about like, how do I do that? How do I contact booksellers to do book readings or, and then
Mhm.
COVID happened. And so
Yes.
it's like all those
Right.
kind of things. So, there's so much to be learned, like you just said, from your friends and family, but then also like
Yes.
reaching out and connecting with people who are in the space, and in
Yes.
the know a little bit about the whole field. Because like I mentioned, even things like the journey of getting an agent, for example. So
Mm.
after this book came out, there's two more book manuscripts that I ended up writing to follow Finding Ohm,
Oh, great.
and which were on contract with my original publisher. But unfortunately, through demands of COVID, they didn't make it through COVID. For those of you who don't know, COVID was, well, it was difficult, of course, for everybody, but for the publishing industry too, there were things that were happening, like the cost of printing went up, the cost of paper went up. So to
Mhm.
produce that beautiful book that you held in your hand, the cost was
Mm.
increasing. And then the shipping costs were crazy. At one point, I think
Yes.
it was costing her like $50 to send one book from the Boston warehouse to Texas, so it was
Yes.
like,
Right.
which she couldn't charge the
Of course.
person purchasing, so
Yeah.
there's just a lot that went on. And so a lot of smaller publishers really suffered a lot. And so unfortunately, those books will not be made with Mango Marigold at this time. But then, I knew I wanted because by this time I was writing more. I was like, I'd like to see my work someplace. And so what's
Yeah.
the next step? And so a lot of my friends kind of were um, leading me down that path of finding an agent. And it's interesting because when you do submit your work on your own, you don't have to share your earnings with somebody, but when you have an agent, they do take a cut. But the benefit of that is they're in the know and they're networked with
Yeah.
all the editors, and they
Right.
also have a good feel of where your book would be well taken care of and what might be a good fit for your work. Um, and so I spent a long time like trying to find agents that fit, that are interested. And for those of you who are interested about that, there's a great site called Manuscript Wish List, and you can sort of look that up where you can go and search different agents and find out what is on their wish list. And so, you could search
Mm,
like yoga, mindfulness,
right.
socio-emotional learning, and you can see who's interested in or who's might be looking for manuscripts about that. And
Mm,
so you would submit to a bunch of different agents. You have to do something called a query letter, which is like a one-page letter, which is like your little elevator pitch of yourself and your work and like what you
yes.
have to offer. And
Right.
and so it's this little song and dance of like finding the right person for
Right.
you. And it takes a while. It took me a while to find my first agent who I worked with for a year. And as we were beginning to move into the submission process, um, different things took her on her own career path. So she decided she was going to focus more on a different genre of like young adult fantasy. And I was the only picture book person she was representing. So it just
Right.
kind of wasn't working out for us. So then I was on the search again for an agent. And then luckily did find somebody again through a yoga friend, actually. So
Oh, great. Yeah.
through our mutual friend Lauren,
Okay.
um, and this was another great fit for me, and worked together with her. And it's beautiful too as you form these different relationships, how much they can shape your creativity and what
Mm,
you think
mm,
you're capable of.
mm,
Um, so it's been
mm.
a really fun sort of way to kind of also um, get my creative juices flowing. And working with my agent, she was saying, "Oh, you have all these." I've now written many different things and branching off into different age groups. And she's like, "You haven't written anything for that really small, like for babies. Like, what if you did?" And
Yes.
so I worked on something this year, which has been on submission, and fingers crossed is going to be finding a publishing home soon. But it's such a long process, right?
Yes.
Like
Right.
I started this whole thing with writing that Christmas was, I think, in 2018, maybe or 19. So it's
Right.
like takes a
Right.
long time, the traditional
Mm,
publishing route, which is in stark contrast to many of our friends who have done the self-publishing route, which also has a lot of benefits to it as well, because you can
mhm.
actually see your project through completion
Right.
quite quickly. And another thing you mentioned, the illustrations, and I had a
Yes.
wonderful illustrator, Morgan Huff, who luckily, because one of the reasons too that I was really keen to publish with Mango and Marigold was because they were a smaller press, they would allow me to have some,
It's
um,
my favorite page.
me too.
It's so
A lot of
sweet.
different reasons, that's a favorite page too.
Yes.
But they allowed me to interact a lot with um, the illustrator, which allowed for her to really tailor it. It is a story of
Yes.
my family, so in all those different ways. But
Mm,
sometimes, like this next book, I did have some say on. I could recommend some illustrators, but sometimes when it's at a
mm,
bigger publishing house, you may not have any say because the art director will only be doing that. So it's these different sort of things that you kind of negotiate with in a traditional publishing sense versus the self-publishing. And the self-publishing route, I'm sure you have much
mm.
more um, you know, um, ability to impact the illustrations and creative control. That was the word I was looking for.
Yes. Right.
And so when you go this traditional route, it's a little bit scary too of an unknown because you're kind of handing your baby over to somebody too.
Right.
bring it to life in a different way. So, but it's
I
all
want to highlight something else that you're saying here too, is that you're not, it doesn't seem like you're attached to the written word. So that you're putting your creative works out in the world, but it's really also who you be.
mm,
So it's really your unique voice, getting clear on your unique voice, your unique background, you yourself as a writer, right? And the relationships are just as important as what you're writing on paper, right?
well,
And so,
that
yeah.
you share that, Giselle, because I think as a writer, we can't be too attached to our words and we have to be willing to shift and grow. So, another part of my writing journey has been the friends that I've made that I share my work with. And so, I have a lot of different circles of critique partners
Mm,
where we will share and exchange our work and critique each other. And when you do that, you have to be ready to hear the feedback. And
yes,
oftentimes it's like the little things that like really hit hard but then something magical happens and like your book
yes,
it was, and then where it ends up is somewhere even better than you thought it could be. So I've
yes.
learned as well coming from medicine, and I was in the research space for a long time writing professional articles, so I learned early on, but then keep learning to not be too attached.
Yes, right, right.
to the-
And you're bringing that beautiful marriage together too of your parents and your family's history, but also your relationship with your children, right? And your experience as a yoga teacher. So it's kind of all coming together in this, yeah, this perfect, beautiful experience, right? In your writing. So,
And I think too, so my specialty is preventive medicine and public health. And part of that, part of the public health training really also helped me to think
mm,
really about how we can impact health. In public
mm,
health, there's the saying that health should really be at the center of all public policy, and all things should center
yes.
health, right? So um, there's so many ways to impact that. And I think,
Hmm.
especially, as a mom, how much some kids just love holding a picture book and they'll spend hours looking at it so it's these little things that actually have room to make big impacts
Mm.
on health and mental health, and all those kinds of things. So I look at the books as an extension of my preventive medicine sort of
Yes.
goals
Yeah.
that I'd like to impact. And another really key part of that is including the cultural elements and being explicit about using some Sanskrit or, things like
Hmm.
um because it's important to value all of these roots as well, and
Right.
I had a really impactful experience when I was working at the university. I was working at the University of Buffalo, and we did a lot of work with the indigenous communities near us. And one of the communities, we worked a lot closely with the Senecas and the Tuscaroras, who are part of the Haudenosaunee, what we call the Iroquois Nation, but their traditional name is Haudenosaunee. And for them, a lot of the work that they were doing as a community was preserving their culture. For the Senecas at that time, there was only 50 or 60 elders left who were speaking language. And I remember we were working with a community health assessment program, and I was having a conversation with one of the elders who was saying, we were talking about a lot of the similarities with yoga philosophies and their philosophies, spiritual.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
he commented, it's wonderful that you are learning from your elders. Make sure that you keep this alive for your children. And that really hit home because, you know, it is really important to sort of be able to foster this tradition and lineage that's been held over time, by many people's ancestors. And
Yes.
um, so yeah, so it's been a fun journey and continues to be that I keep learning from. So
Right. And it's worth it. Like you were talking about the traditional publishing journey may be long, but it's so worth it, right? Because every step of the way you've learned something new. And I was thinking about you saying about having a book maybe for babies. Can you imagine if you know, let's say in the United States or in North America, if every physician presented the babies in the 1 year checkup? Imagine if they could present every family with your book, right?
Well,
Or a
my
series of books.
perfect for that,
It'd be amazing.
but the books that there's so many books even of people that'll listen here that you might create. Who knows?
Yes, yes.
But it is a long journey. At the same time, I think I've learned so much, and I keep learning
Mm,
so much from my peers who write. And
yes.
um, if I were to think of a few tips for people who are embarking on this journey, um, one of the biggest things would be to, if you really are thinking of exploring writing for children, is to look into your local Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators organization, SCBWI, which is a national organization that has local and regional chapters, and they're wonderful. A lot of them run um, monthly meetings or seasonal workshops, conferences, and it's a great way to connect and meet future critique partners maybe that you might share your work with, or even if you have yoga friends who are interested in writing, to be able to share with each other. That's a really valuable place to kind of sort of begin. uh,
Yes.
Another place is Highlights. If you remember the Highlights magazines from when we
Yes.
were kids, um,
Yes.
they have a beautiful retreat center between New York and Pennsylvania, actually, but hold online programming as well, like workshops for writers and community retreats and things like that, where you can kind of learn more about the craft and connect with other people.
Mm,
Um, there's also this place called the Writing Barn, which is in Texas, I think, but they also have a lot of online sort of things. So there's all these little places too where you can sort of connect and start tiptoeing in. Um, but the other things I will say that helped me is, you had mentioned, how part of this was bringing together pieces of my journey, is to really just let yourself be present with your own practice
mm.
and your engagement with littles. And if you're teaching them like the little insights and things that come up, you never know. It's so funny when I hang out with picture book friends, it's like every little thing, it's like, oh, well, that could be a story. That
Right.
can
Right.
be.
Yes, totally.
Can be. And then um, also letting writing be part of your practice. So that was another thing that I have leaned into a lot, where I might tag on like 5 minutes of writing after my movement and meditation practice, so where I'm writing for the sake of writing, not to create something, but just, reflecting and writing, keep pen on paper, for 5 minutes, and just to get in the practice of writing. It's another skill, that we keep developing as we keep doing it. And the more you're doing it, the more you let yourself sort of lean into that flow of creativity, so that it can kind of be that wellspring that nourishes what you keep doing. So
Love that. It sounds like too, you're sharing it a lot so that you can hear how the words land for your audience, especially little ones, right? So some wording may be different, right?
correct,
Specific, depend on your audience and the age group.
correct.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So what advice do you have? So you've talked about some tips, and I want to ask you about the Kids Lit. Do you have a favorite Kids Lit community that you're using online you recommend for people?
So there are also many different online groups like there. I know I haven't joined them personally, but one that a lot of my friends have done is, there's a group called 12 by 12, where you can when you sign in, you commit to, I think it's like writing a book a month or something like that,
Okay.
writing something a month. And also you share and critique, and you can pop in and out. I think now it's like you pay monthly or something like that, but they have wonderful workshops and things like that. And so that's another place to start. But I do think, as your local Society for Children's Books Writers and Illustrators is a great place to start, because already on their website they have a lot of resources. But then again, like I said, regionally, they have conferences,
Mm.
workshops, and kind of those in-person things. I know a lot of us are kind of having Zoom overload now, and
Yes,
I know
right.
it's
Right.
nice to have the in-person contact. So,
Yeah.
so, um, so that's another really great place to kind of connect with other people who are also venturing in, and you get to meet those people who are on different parts of their journey. You've got your prolific authors who are part of this group, and then those who have been there for a few years, those who are just starting. So it's
Yeah.
kind of nice to be in that kind of a setting. So
So my takeaways are keep writing, keep sharing, connect with people, and just keep going, right?
yeah,
And know that it's not going to happen necessarily overnight. You may get lucky, fortunate on the way, but enjoy the journey, right? The journey
and
is
that's
great because even when you publish it, that's when another part of the journey
right.
starts, right?
And that's yoga is that's it's that kind of being present
Hmm.
with it, to be present with it. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, and there's, even if nothing happens, there's so much healing and nurturing that happens when we are just creative, that
Mm.
that itself can be really nourishing. And
Right.
so letting yourself to like savor that you can do this. Like
Yes,
all those little pieces.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's
Oh, I love it. That's so great. So how do we find you online? Tell us
yeah,
how we
so
can.
of all the social media places, I'm probably most active on Instagram. And so I'm just at Rashmi Bismark on Instagram. So you can follow me there. I post a lot about my teaching stuff that I'm doing, but then also when the book stuff comes up. And then I'm part of a few Kidlit supportive communities. So Kidlit in Color, which you can check their website as well. There's a newsletter that you can sign up for Kidlit in Color. And then I'm also part of this group, Kidlit Collective. And similarly, I post about stuff with fellow authors and things like that there too. I have a website. I can share that with you, Giselle. And you and I had been talking. Finding Om, unfortunately is out of print now, so you're able to find it at your local libraries. But there is a freely downloadable curriculum guide that went along with it. So I'll share the link of that with
Great.
you, and people might enjoy that as well. So.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much, Rashmi, for taking this time. It's so great. Just it was so lovely, not only to connect, but I really hope that people listening get so many little gems of what to do next to get their works
Which
out in the world.
feeling afraid to like write to a fellow author, don't be
Yes.
afraid to write to me. If you have
Yes.
anything.
Yes. I love it.
I'm happy to share more about the journey.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, so I've taken the traditional path. There's so many authors in our community who are self-published,
Mm.
have a lot to share as well. So don't be afraid to reach out. We're a fun group of people. So
Yes. Exactly. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rashmi.
yes, thank you.
Okay.